If I had to pick in this day and age, one plant that would probably help most people, I would say oats in their milky form. It's probably just what most of us need.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. First up is the Herbs with Rosalee Student Spotlight. Each week we take a moment to celebrate one of our amazing students and their inspiring contributions to our herbal community. This week we're delighted to shine the spotlight on Laurette Carey from Ontario, Canada. Laurette began her journey with us in Rooted Medicine Circle last year, where she embraced the art of making potent herbal medicine while nurturing a deep personal connection to the living world around her. Following the certificate path, Laurette's module reviews were consistently mindful and detailed, full of reflection and reverence. One especially beautiful moment she shared was about her sit spot experience. She wrote, "My sit spot is nourishing me in many ways, from gratitude, peace, joy, and bliss to medicinal gifts. It grounds me and restores me. Choosing my backyard as my sit spot made it easier to visit daily. I would glance out the sun porch windows while completing my to-do list and feel compelled to stop and go outside. It's like a magnet. It calls for me." Her words capture so perfectly the magic of slowing down and letting the living world guide the way. Now in our Herbal Energetics course, Laurette continues to shine. She's diving in deep, exploring her plant allies with curiosity and care. Her reviews show not only a growing understanding of herbal energetics, but also a blossoming confidence in her role as an herbalist. To celebrate Laurette's contributions, Harmonic Arts is gifting her a $50 gift certificate to explore their exceptional herbal products. From functional mushrooms and tinctures to herbal lattes and artisan teas, Harmonic Arts crafts high-quality products with care. As a certified B Corp, they're dedicated to making a positive impact and continuously striving to nurture the connection between people and planet. Thank you, Harmonic Arts, for supporting our community and for your thoughtful offerings. If you'd like to explore Harmonic Arts offerings and support this show, you can find the link in the show notes. When checking out, use the coupon code ROSALEE. That's ROSALEE to get a 15% discount on your order. Hey, it's Rosalee. You know, creating this podcast has been one of the most rewarding parts of my herbal work. And if you found something meaningful here, whether it's a new perspective, a favorite recipe, or just a sense of calm, I want to let you know there's a good way to go even deeper. It's called the Podcast Circle. Inside, you'll get access to live classes taught by some of my favorite herbal teachers, behind-the-scenes updates, and a beautiful library of herbal resources that we've gathered over the years. But more than that, it's a space to connect with fellow plant lovers who care about the same things you do. And truly, your membership helps make this podcast possible. It's how we keep the episodes coming and the herbal goodness flowing. So if you're ready to be part of something more, something rooted in connection, head over to herbalpodcastcircle.com. I'd love to see you there. If there's one herb that feels like a big herbal hug for our stressed out, always on the go world, it might just be Milky Oats. In this episode, I'm joined by the wonderful Yemaya, a longtime herbalist with so much herbal wisdom to share, and we dive into why Milky Oats might be the herb we all need right now. Yemaya brings not only deep insight into this gentle, nourishing plant, but also a fantastic formula that you'll definitely want to try. Oh, and did I mention she sings in this episode? This conversation was such a joy. It was uplifting, wise, and full of heart. For those of you who don't already know her, Yemaya Kimmel is a clinical herbalist based in Humboldt County, California, with over 25 years of experience working with healing plants. She has a special focus on supporting women over 40, especially those navigating stress, burnout, and chronic health challenges that can come with aging. Yemaya offers one-on-one herbal wellness consultations both in person in Eureka and online, where she collaborates with clients to craft personalized herbal protocols that reflect each person's unique story. Her greatest passion is helping people feel empowered to care for themselves with the support of plant medicine. Welcome to the podcast, Yemaya.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I know you're on my friend Mason's podcast, Herb Rally, so I've gotten to know you a little bit through there, and now we get to dive in even more. So I'm excited, and I'd love to start with your herbal story and what has brought you along the plant path.
Yeah, so it kind of it was one of those things where one door just opened up and led to another. It kind of started when I was 19. And I was living in Miami, which is where I grew up. And even though it's a big city, Miami is, it's a haven for a lot of different types of plants. Almost anything will grow there. And I just took all of that for granted. I didn't even really think about that until I had this friend who was not an herbalist. He was a landscape designer, but he was the first person that I ever met that had this sort of reverence for plants. And so he had this practice where he would wake up every morning and he would go outside and he would greet all of his plants by their Latin name. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. First of all, I'm like, oh, like, of course you should greet your plants, like we greet our pets, we greet our family members, we greet our friends. Why haven't I ever been taught to greet my plants? So, and then I found out later that, just greeting plants by the Latin name really helps us to memorize that. So I think it's just a really cool practice, which later on I tried to incorporate into my life. And I still, sometimes I forget, but I still try to do it from time to time. And so he was sort of the first person that I met that made me start to think about plants as the living, beautiful, energy-giving beings that they are. And it was around the same time that I ended up somehow with Michael Tierra's book, The Way of Herbs, which I have heard is a gateway to herbalism for a lot of folks. So it's kind of cliche, but that really was what, the first book that I had. And I just fell in love. Something just sort of struck me. I had grown up in just sort of like your typical kind of standard American diet. When we were sick, we went to the doctor, even with a cold. You get antibiotics for everything. That was kind of the life that I grew up in. And this really just sort of sparked a chord deep within me that made me realize that there's just more to health and healing than what I had been experiencing. So I immediately started buying a bunch of plants, even though I lived in a townhouse and I had this tiny little strip of grass that I turned into my culinary herb garden. Oh, cool. And I did not know how to garden. And I just stuffed as many different varieties of sage and basil and mint that I could. And then I would use it in cooking. And that was kind of my, first step into the world of herbalism. And then fast forward to a few years later, I found myself living in Woodstock, New York. I was 22, and I saw a flyer for a moon lodge with a woman named Susan Weed. And I thought, this looks interesting. And I had a friend who was like, oh yeah, I apprenticed with her. Let's go. You'll like it. So I went, and one thing that really struck me with Susan, I ended up buying her books, and I see this a lot in her books too, but also in her in her teaching, her just sort of reverence for the plants as more than just a physical, practical sort of this herb for that. I mean, she really does embrace, herbs as a spiritual path. Mm-hmm. And especially in healing wise, for example, where she really talks about the spirit of the plant that speaks. And it had an impact on me because I realized once I met her and started experiencing this, that this was going to be more than a hobby and that it would be more than a career and would be and is very much a part of my spiritual path. Really just learning about how to connect with plants one at a time, how to really sit with the plant and be open to the energy that we're receiving, to sort of the download and the communication that we can receive. And I think a lot of your listeners, and you probably can attest to this too, that if we really sit with a plant and we open ourselves, the plant will speak to us, usually, if it wants to. I find that, and it does. And it sometimes words come, right? But it's more of like this, like beyond words kind of download, and it's beyond, like sometimes you can, learn a little bit about its uses, but it's more like this. It's like this energy exchange. It's kind of like when we meet a friend for coffee, right? Like we have all of these friends that are mostly acquaintances, and then we take the time to get to know somebody, and we hang out with them one-on-one, and we get closer, and we just sort of have this connection. And it's the same exact thing with the plants. And so that is something that I learned from Susan, and that to this day, if I'm working with a plant, or if I'm going to be recommending a plant, if it's growing near me, or if I'm able to sit with it, I do that practice, as much as I can, to sort of just be open and receive that download. So that's something that I attribute to Susan. And, I wasn't able to like really afford a lot of her workshops. So I used to go to her work exchange weekends, and you would sort of get points for being able to attend workshops. So I was able to do that. I went to a few of her workshops. She lived, like about a half hour from me. So I was able to go and do that. I was never her apprentice, but, and maybe this is why, but we got along really well. And I just really appreciate like where just her reverence and her, the way she spoke about plants as a spiritual path. So that's what I got from Susan. And then I had a few kids. I moved out to the West Coast. Oh, before that, this is actually really cool. So a couple of years later, I saw a flyer for the Women's Herbal Conference in New Hampshire, and it was put on by Rosemary Gladstar. And I was like, wow, I have to go to this. I don't know how I'm going to go to this, because I was living really day to day as a musician. And I was like, somehow I have to go to this. And so I thought, well, I teach drumming classes, I perform. I wonder if there's a place for something like this at this event. And so I called the number on the flyer, because back then that's what you did. Like internet was there, but it wasn't like the main way of doing things. So I called the number, and Rosemary herself answered the phone. And wow. I was like, wow, okay. And I told her a little bit about what I did, and was there maybe a place for that at this event, because I'd love to attend. And she goes, why don't you sing for me over the phone right now?
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So I can't remember what I sung, but I did as she asked, and I sang her a song. I think it was like one of those like sort of rainbow style chants. And she was so sweet and so supportive, and she gave me the gig. And attending that event and meeting Rosemary and, other amazing herbalists. There's actually a whole nother story for another time of the synchronicities that happened when I was there that first year. Meeting and becoming friends with Janine Parvati Baker, who was my favorite author at the time. It was like when you met Tori Amos. That's how I was. And then
I love it.
And then it turned out that my father-in-law was an author too. And I went and gave her one of his books, and she was like, oh my gosh, I used to give this out to my students. Where can I get more? So we ended up becoming friends until she passed in 2005. And anyway, coming to that event was like, wow, I found my people. These are the people that understand that feeling of just being drawn into this plant world and just everything that herbs have to offer us. And so then I ended up moving out a couple of years later, had a couple of kids, moved out here, and met Jane Bothwell and started studying at Dandelion Herbal Center. And I took all her courses. And then it was only after her 10-month herbal study program that I was like, oh, I guess I can call myself an herbalist now. Like I had a pretty good foundation. And I started making products for my family. And then I had extras, so I'd hand them out to my friends. And that was kind of like the soft start to what became my product side of my business. I know that's probably like the same for a lot of people. It wasn't super glamorous or anything, but it was just like people would start asking me for stuff and asking to buy stuff. And it kind of just happened from there. And, I, during the time I was raising, my 3 kids, and I came across Herb Mentor. And there was this course on Herb Mentor with someone named Rosalee de la something.
She's all
It
right.
was Herbs in Practice, I think was
Oh,
the name of the course. And I loved it so much. And I was like, wow, like it kind of honestly was what inspired me to be like, I want to be a clinical herbalist. Like,
oh
this is
wow.
what I want to do. I want to help people and with these kinds of things. And just like, honestly, I'm not kidding. Like the clarity that you spoke, you just made it so accessible, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I think this is what I want to do. And then so I just went on to study with like Seja Papam and
Wonderful.
Herbal Academy. And then I went back and took Jane Bothwell's clinical mentorship program.
Hmm.
And then it sort of started the same way the products business started. It's like people started asking me to help them with stuff. So I just started. And then somewhere along the line, I think it was like in 2020 or 2021, I started getting people that I didn't know for clients. And I think that's when it really starts, when
Mm-hmm.
seeing friends and family is one thing, but then when you're like, oh, I have this person who I don't know. And now I really got to get my shit together. And that's kind of, yeah. So now here I am.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Yemaya, there was so much good stuff in there that I want to circle back to.
Sure.
Um, Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that it was like the reverence for the plants that like kind of like sparked something in you. That's really cool. And I think that is something that makes herbalism so special. Like there's like we could say there's homeopathy. It doesn't quite like homeopathy is great, not saying anything bad for all you homeopaths out there, but there's rarely do you see homeopaths with that like reverence for the plants because they're often dealing with like these little pills. Um,
Mm-hmm.
versus whole, working with the plants themselves. And of course, pharmacists aren't usually like, oh, I love this Zoloft and like connecting with that or whatever. It's like it's just different that we can like actually fall in love with our materia medica and have reverence, as you so beautifully said. And I love the vision of your friend, waking up and greeting plants is the first thing. I love that he was a landscaper too, and that was his practice. Like I bet he had a very deep spiritual connection with landscaping if that is how he approached it. So that sounds so beautiful.
Yeah, he was the kind of person, like, he actually smoked tobacco and he smoked cannabis, but he refused to smoke around those plants. Like, because
I
he was
didn't
like,
want to
this
offend
is
him.
disrespect. Yes, he was. And I was, I didn't even think it was weird. I was like, oh my gosh, you're totally right. I
Mm,
never thought of this before. And it made sense,
mm,
like we forget. I think when we're not, herbalists, we all know, your listeners all know, but people who don't know, we forget that herbs are alive. They're living beings, just like animals are living beings and people are
mhm.
living beings. And yeah, having that reverence for life, it just made sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. And I love you said something too, like you knew that herbalism was going to be more than a hobby and more than a career. And I love the way you put that. Because that I think for many of us is how, even if it's like not our full-time um, endeavor, I think that's how many of us feel, more than a hobby, more than a career. Sometimes like when I'm talking to people, just like random people, I'll like mention like my job. And as soon as I say it, I'm always like, where did that word come from? Like, I don't really have a job. like even just the word career sounds weird to me. It's a life calling and
Yeah, it's a
one that the
lifestyle.
plants call us to. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it is. It's a
yeah. So
way, it's
beautiful.
just a way of being. It's, and then everything else just kind of, falls into step around that.
That's so true. Yep, that's so
Yeah,
true. And I
yeah.
appreciated your words about Susan. I'm drinking my nettle oat straw nourishing
Mm,
infusion. I'm on a big kick
yes.
of them right now. So I specifically learned that preparation from her and always have a bit of gratitude, for her teaching that
Yes.
because it's been a foundational part of my herbal practice, for over 20 years now. So
Oh, nourishing infusion. I got my oat straw infusion right here. And
lovely.
I usually do put nettle in it, but since, we're talking about oats today, I figured I'd go all oat.
Nice, nice. That
And
is
then
such
I
a
even have a
delicious drink.
few dropperfuls of the Milky Oats tincture in there too.
Awesome. Well, let's segue into Milky Oats, your chosen herb for today's episode. And I'm excited to hear more specifically about Milky Oats. And I'm always curious because I imagine it's probably a hard decision of like what herb to choose. And I'm curious, why did Milky Oats speak to you?
Well, so first of all, I was going back and forth. Should I talk about just oats or should I talk about Milky Oats? And I love the whole plant, and I'm happy to talk about oat straw and oatmeal and all the different parts of the plant. But I really just think that right now in our time, and I live in the United States, so I can only speak for our country, but maybe it's the whole world. I think that we just are in a very stressed out. A lot of people are overwhelmed. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people are stressed and overworked. And you add that to the fact that, like, we just naturally live in this digital society where everything is like, have it now. And we are rewarding, there's sort of like this reward for overworking and for busyness. And so what that ends up is a recipe for just nervous system burnout, overwhelm, just feeling like we can't catch up with ourselves and take a deep breath. And that we sort of just, we're just burnt out. I think as a society, I think as a culture, we are just so burnt out. And so I think that that is where Milky Oats comes in. It's one of those plants that I feel like it just, I wouldn't say that one plant is for every single person, but if I had to pick, in this day and age, one plant that would probably help most people, I would say oats in their milky form is probably just what most of us need.
I think I would agree with you on that. And that's also something that I would be very uncomfortable stating. My go-to is hawthorn often for those kinds of statements, but I could see making room for Milky Oats in this. I'm with you on this one, Yemaya.
Yeah, I would say nettle too, but for other reasons, but Milky Oats, yeah. So like, and I think it's one of those plants, right, where we have we have like the panacea plants that are just good for so many different things. Like we have ginger and we have dandelion and we have calendula, and like each of those herbs does so many different things. And then we have, something like Milky Oats is a very niche plant. It's like a specialist, and I think that what it specializes in, it really specializes in the nervous system and specifically in rebuilding and restoring and, just nourishing the nervous system. And it does that so well. And I don't know, for me, it's the first plant that I think of when I think of like, how do I help to restore somebody's nervous system? Milky Oats is the first thing. And I think of it like the way I liken it to is like, so imagine a newborn baby, right? And you're a newborn baby. It's got to be the most overwhelming thing in the world because you are just all of a sudden, for the first time, you're experiencing all these sights, you're experiencing sounds and feelings. And oh my God, what is this hunger? And who are all these people? But I don't even have a name for all these people. Just like, what is going on? And you don't have words to describe how you feel, and you can't do anything for yourself. So you just cry and cry and cry. And if you're lucky, you get picked up and you get put to your mama's breast, and you get to get that sweet tropho-restorative nutritive nectar, and you're held, right? And you start to feel like, oh, okay. You stop crying. You're like, everything's going to be okay. And I feel like that's what I like in Milky Oats too, is that we have, all these people who are stressed out, they're overwhelmed, they're burnt out. Maybe they're working too hard. Maybe they're just overstimulated. They feel like they can't get off the merry-go-round. They just don't know how to sort of get a grasp on life. And I feel like you take that beautiful, sweet, milky latex and you just squeeze an oat and suck on it. And it reminds me of just nursing from Mother Earth. And over time, you're being held. And what I notice is that, and I think this comes directly from the fact that this plant is actually rebuilding and restoring and replenishing your nervous system. And so what that does energetically is that it will change your perception, and the stress will still be there. All the things that you're worried about, they're all still there. They're not going to go away. But over time with Milky Oats, it's like, oh, okay, I got this. I got this. I don't feel bent out of shape anymore. I don't feel overwhelmed anymore. I feel like I can tackle this thing. And so that resilience, I think the way that that happens is just sort of the magical side of the way Milky Oats works, and it gives us confidence, which is why I think that all of these things just, I feel like it just helps us to be happier people because of that, the way that that all goes down in the process of how that happens.
Oh, Yemaya, that was so beautiful. I have two thoughts for you. First is I'm thinking like, oh man, here's another herb I need to start taking every day. It's already been on my mind. I have a friend who takes Milky Oats every day, and I've been thinking it when he mentions it. I'm like, I should maybe add that to my daily practice as well. The second thing I'm wondering is like, how do we get this in the water supply? Is the other
Right? Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? We need to do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, let's talk some, if you don't mind. I'm curious to hear about the making of the Milky Oats medicine. And I think one of the biggest things of aspects of confusion I see is like, what's the difference between Milky Oats and oat straw and dried oat tops? Because sometimes those get called Milky Oats, which is confusing. So if you could like bring some clarity to that situation. And I'm like asking you 5 questions right now. Also, how do you make Milky Oats medicine? All of those things. I'm just going to throw it over at you now.
Okay, so let me see if I can answer that in a way that sort of describes the process at the same time, right? So Milky Oats, so plants have all these ways that they work, right? There's the physical, like medicinal part of things, but then there's also like just their energy and how they work. So Milky Oats, right? They are the seed that is actually, for our purposes, it's the ripe phase, but for the purposes of the oats themselves, they're in their unripe phase. They are in that, it's a very small window of time where you can actually take a seed and you squeeze it and this beautiful white milk comes out of it. And that is the restorative tonic right there. That is the nervine tropho restorative, which in English just means an herb that replenishes and, nourishes the nervous system and rebuilds the nervous system. And so you want you want the plant in its fresh form for this purposes. Now, oat straw is great. I love oat straw and probably oat tops too, and oatmeal itself, right? They all have nutritive qualities. They all have heart healthy qualities. There's so much goodness in there. But when we're talking about the nervine tropho restorative, like just that particular very specific specialist thing that only the milky portion does, you need to have the fresh plant, in my opinion. You need to have the fresh plant. You need to be able to squeeze out the sap, right? So the first lesson that I think it teaches us, right, is, sort of just being present in the present moment. Because if you're going to go out and you're going to harvest Milky Oats, you can't just wait till you feel like it. You can't wait till you're done with what you're doing. You have to, you're checking them every day. And okay, now is the time. I need to get out there and harvest this. Everything else can wait. I need to go be present with the oats right now. So that is the first lesson of teaching us how to be present so that we're not so overwhelmed, because in the present moment, there's very little to be overwhelmed about usually. It's mostly
very wise words right there.
Yeah, like mostly we're worrying about the future or we're drowning in our to-do list or whatever it is. But in the present moment, okay, if I put everything else aside and just be with this plant, that's the first healing step. And for me, the second healing step, and I'm just going to describe my process of how I make a Milky Oats tincture. Cool. So harvesting the plant, if any of your listeners out there can attest this, maybe it's just me, but I find the process of harvesting Milky Oats so satisfying and so therapeutic. And I don't know if that's like a stim thing, but I'm out there in the sunshine and this plant is like dancing in the wind and I have my basket underneath me and I just sort of rake the seeds and they go pop, 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 pop into my basket. Yeah. Yes, it's such a satisfying feeling. So it's probably my favorite plant to harvest because of that. And so that in itself is just so relaxing. I find that when I'm done doing that, I don't even need to take it anymore because I've already just experienced the healing. And then I sit down with it. And before I make a tincture, I like to take a few of the seeds and just like suck on them like candy. Like just I'm nursing from Mama Earth right now. I want to get some of the download that is straight from the tap before I go and process it.
I like that.
Yeah. And I advise everyone who can get their hands on the fresh oats to try that, because it's a different experience than just taking the tincture. It's just so, I don't even know, I don't have words for it, but it's altering in a way. Not in like a psychedelic way or anything like that, but it's just, it does something. You have to just experience it. And so it's one of those plants that I don't always blend up my tinctures. I know some herbalists blend up everything, but with Milky Oats, I always will blend it up. So I try to pack it in as much as possible. Like if I can get to a 1-to-1, that's awesome. But sometimes it's like a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-3. And then I will put it in the Vitamix and blend it all up, because what you want is you want that milk. You want that milk that's inside of the seeds. So the more that you can break up the seeds, the stronger your tincture is going to be. And I say tincture because I just think that's the best way to get the goodness of the plant, because you're getting, again, you want to work with the fresh plant. And if you can make a tea with the fresh plant, I guess, but most of us don't have access to that. And so I don't think that the oat tops, while I think they're nutritive and I think they're great, I don't think that we're going to get the same kind of effect as we do with like just the latex, the juicy milk, juicy milk, the insides of the milky phase of the oats. I really think that that's where the goods are. And that's what we, if we want the nervine tropho-restorative effect, then we have to ingest that. That's my opinion. I know other people probably have other ways of doing things, and, a lot of different things work for a lot of people, but that's my take on it.
What's your take on if somebody is just like, I just can't do alcohol, using something else like glycerin or even vinegar in the fresh stage?
I've never made a vinegar with it. So I don't really know. Like, I haven't personally experienced the effects of it. How are the constituents, how does the vinegar extract the constituents? I'm not really sure. I do know that you can make a good glycerite, though. I've had some great Milky Oat glycerites. So yeah, that's definitely a possibility. You could always use vegetable glycerin. Yeah.
I've never done the vinegar either, but now that I'm thinking about it, I really want to. That sounds good.
Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't work. Yeah.
You'd certainly be getting some nutritive qualities.
Oh, yeah. I think if I was doing the vinegar, I'd probably do the oats and like the straw together.
Good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, just to get all of that in there, because I know the vinegar is really good at extracting the minerals too. So then you have like this superpower infused vinegar that sort of has everything the plant has to offer in there.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
New project. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, thank you so much for describing that process. Like you, I also blend the Milky Oats. That was something I learned from my friend Jim McDonald many, many moons ago. And it turns like when you first make it, it's like this bright neon green color that calms down after a while. But I love the fresh Milky Oats when it's in that stage of just being super, super bright green. And and so I know you must take it as a simple, because you mentioned having some Milky Oats tincture that you put into your oat straw today. And I know you also like to formulate with it, and you've shared a formula with us that I'm really excited about. So would you mind walking us through that?
Yeah, so that is Oh Happy Day. And oh happy day, oh happy day. So when I'm not being an herbalist, I'm a singer in a few different musical groups. And so I really enjoy naming tincture blends after songs. I don't always get to do this because it doesn't always jump out at me, but there are certain times, and this was one of those times where like a song just jumped out at me that sort of described the essence of what I wanted the formula to be about. And so I think about it as, the intention is to bring us more joy back into our lives. And so that's where the title came from. And so let's see, Milky Oats, skull cap. And so the reason that I added the skull cap is because I know it's a very traditional pear in Western herbalism. I see it used a lot. And I do think in the same way as like dandelion and burdock kind of work together to synergize and sort of bring out the best in each other, I think that skullcap and Milky Oats do that too. And so I think of it as sort of like, so Milky Oats is more of like the buffer. I feel like Milky Oats is the cushion, right? It helps us to adapt. It helps us to sort of just have that, over time ability to be able to, think about our stress differently. It's more of like a landing cushion, where I feel like skullcap is, more of like up here, kind of what it says. Like, so the person who's just worrying constantly, they have that like just constant monologue in their head. They're worrying. They can't go to sleep because they just got the loop going on. And I feel like it just puts a cap on that and helps us to be able to, get more into our body and less into our head. So I also think it helps us to sort of relax our shoulders a bit and sort of just, like I don't see it as something that will put us to sleep necessarily. I guess in high doses it would, but more of just like it calms us down. And I think it restores our nerves in that way. And somehow I just think they bring the best out in each other. So that is a pair that I use a lot. The St. John's wort, I think, is optional. I know that a lot of people can't use St. John's wort or want to be on the cautious side because, it is known to not play very well with a lot of, pharmaceutical medications. And I think it's totally fine to leave it out. But I did add it because, again, I think those three herbs together work really nicely. And I see St. John's wort as like, so it's a plant that people use a lot for, like nerve pain. And so I think of a burnt out nervous system, like a nervous system that's really stuck in a sympathetic mode, as a nervous system that's hurting, right? Maybe it's not physical pain, but it's still hurt equals pain. And so I think that St. John's wort maybe just, it has an affinity for the nervous system. And it's one of those panaceas, right? Like it does so many different things, but it really does have an affinity for the nerves. And again, it seems to work really nicely with the skullcap and the Milky Oats. And then the reason I added the lemon balm is because I think, and that's where the joy comes in. I think a lot of us who get into this, sympathetic mode, we're stressed out, we're working too hard. We kind of just forgot how to have joy. Our senses are usually dimmer. And I think that lemon balm really, it energetically will calm us down and sort of center us a little bit. But it also kind of sharpens our senses and invites that feeling of joy and delight back in. And so that's why, and it could be a glycerite or a tincture. I recommend the glycerite because it just tastes so good and it helps the entire blend to just taste amazing.
Yeah, I love the suggestion of glycerite in there because, like you said, the taste is so good. I love adding a little bit of glycerites to formulas because it like removes the harshness of the alcohol. It just rounds it out in a way that, I don't know, especially for this formula, just makes sense. Like, oh, happy day. Like we want it to taste good and be fun. And I have to say, Yemaya, one of my less flattering qualities is that I can be very critical, and I can be very critical of herbal formulas because I'm kind of a snob. And I love this herbal formula. Like, this is beautiful. I love it. I love all the intention and just like it really makes sense. And just the lemon balm glyceride, I think like gives it that like extra notch up. And yeah. And this is a formula that you sell.
Yeah, depending on when this airs, sometimes I have it out for sale and sometimes I don't. And I make it a lot for clients, but it is also a formula that, you can check my website when this comes out. I'll try to make sure that I have some by then. But it's one of those formulas that I use a lot and that it can be customized to sort of like fit your needs. So for example, for me, I like it as is. I will use it as is. And if you need to take out the St. John's wort, it's still good as is. But if you think about like the individual person and you think about like either the root cause or maybe the effect that the burnout is having, or maybe just like sort of a tandem symptom that's going on, you can really, there are other plants that really help bring out this formula and that also can address some of those needs. So a few examples, like maybe you're overwhelmed with grief and maybe you just lost someone close to you and you don't know how to deal with, life now. And that's where I would maybe add a little hawthorn and rose to the tincture. I think that would be a really nice blend. Maybe this is affecting your heart and maybe you have high blood pressure because of all your anxiety, or maybe you have heart palpitations, or maybe you're just prone to like panic attacks. I would definitely put some motherwort in, and also the hawthorn again in that sense. Maybe this is something that's been going on for a really long time and your vital force is really depleted. I would throw ashwagandha in there. As a matter of fact, I think ashwagandha is another one that just works so well with Milky Oats that maybe just throw it in anywhere, throw it in anyway if you want to and see how it works for you, ashwagandha is so good at replenishing the nervous system, and especially like that deep kind of loss of vital force that just happens over time from being in this state for a really long time. And let's see what else. Maybe you're having brain fog. Maybe you're having trouble concentrating because of all the stress. Maybe throw some gotu kola in there. You could throw some Tulsi if you feel like you're out of center and you need help grounding yourself. So there's all these ways that you can customize it and make it work for your situation. And I'm a big advocate of that. If you need to customize something, take a recipe and make it for you, because we all come to these needs, with different root causes, and we all have different constitutions, and we all have different stories and situations. And so, customizing it is, it's fine to play with it and see what works for you. The only thing I would advise against is don't do all of those suggestions at once.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Because then you'll just be all over the place. But play with it, see what works, for your need.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. Yeah, my add-in, not to be too revealing about me and my issues, but I would add in blue vervain. That would be my herb, which I think would fit really well in there. So
I could use some blue vervain in there too.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people who are like, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this formula with us, and listeners can download their copy of this beautifully illustrated recipe and formula at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com, or just check out the show notes. Wonderful. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share about Milky Oats before we move on, Yemaya?
Yeah, actually, I also want to say, because this is a really important other way that I use it for, and it comes from that same specific quality of it being able to restore the nervous system. But it seems to work really well for people who are coming off of addictions. And, disclaimer, it's not going to, it's not going to take away your cravings. It doesn't do that. But it will sort of recalibrate the nervous system after you've been on this substance for a long time and you're coming off of it, and your nervous system is going to go a little wild for a while. And, that's where I would blend it with skullcap. And in the case of like tobacco addiction, maybe throw some lobelia in there. But again, I'm not doing it to curb the craving. I'm doing it to help the nervous system to be able to rebuild. And, obviously that's really prevalent in situations like, caffeine or meth or cocaine, overstimulate, even like stimulant adaptogens that are overused. Your nervous system is going to be just really wired. And oats is great for that. But I've seen it work in other ways too. And you just kind of formulate it for the person. And again, that's specific for nervous system restoration, not for taking away cravings. But it's a great herb to have, alongside your other tools and the other things that you're doing to help. And I would also even add oat straw infusion with that as well, because then you're getting the extra minerals that are probably, needing to be put back in your body. So yeah, that is another way that I use Milky Oats.
Thanks for sharing that. Where my mind went, just because I've been thinking about this a lot, is kind of our society's problem with dopamine, and the hits we get from like constant notifications from our phones, or the doom scrolling or whatever. It makes me think about that, because I know a lot of folks are trying to move away from even just like news headlines, like all of these things that are just kind of hitting our nervous systems constantly, and it's become this like constant background noise for us.
Yeah, and that's wreaking havoc on our nervous systems tremendously. So I do think Milky Oats is a good, thing to work with if you're trying to sort of remove yourself from social media, or just take a break from, it's that dopamine, that like constant hit of adrenaline that we get from that. So yeah, that would make a lot of sense to use in that way too.
I guess that comes about. I was listening to a podcast the other day and it was talking about how so there are so many kids who are addicted to screens and video games and,
Mm.
um, but it was talking about how like it does become like a chemical addiction to these things. And so to just remove the video games or whatever in like a cold turkey approach, is really not good because it really does
Mhm.
like affect, kids in a very strong way. I just thought that was so
Mhm.
fascinating because we hear about like cold turkey with nicotine or, something like more of a drug abuse thing. And I thought, wow, like that's so fascinating that these things are, and obviously we can talk about kids, but it's true for everybody who might be in that relationship with these um, devices and everything. So yeah, I think that's why my mind went there when you talked about it. I never really thought about that before. Just that other area of addiction that's all pervasive in our society right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and you could even go there with like people who have, food sensitivities and they're trying to take certain types of foods out of their
Mm,
diet. It's going to
ex-
be that same kind of like it brings up anxiety, and
mhm.
yeah, that's where the Milky Oats absolutely comes in. And it's not a quick fix, it's not something that I would say do it once in an acute situation. No, Milky Oats is more of like you just do it over time, and it's subtle, and then all of a sudden like 3 weeks later you're like, oh wow, I don't feel so freaked out anymore.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for adding that in. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all this lovely wisdom about Milky Oats. I'm
Oh,
sure I'm not the only one out there who's now thinking like, okay, time to open up the Milky Oats tincture. So thanks
yeah.
for that. Add that to my list.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not one of the listed adaptogens because, like in my mind, because it helps us adapt to stress,
Hmm.
it seems like it would be, in my mind, how I feel like an adaptogen, that's what an adaptogen is supposed to do. So I don't know why it's not on that list, but I'm all for putting it there.
I wonder just because I'm studying with David Winston right now, who like literally wrote the book on adaptogens.
Yeah, yeah,
And so he's very particular about what gets called an adaptogen and what isn't. And
yeah,
he's relying on scientific literature to determine that rather than like a traditional use. And I'm
right.
guessing that there's not a lot of scientific studies on fresh milky oats.
That's what
So
I was wondering.
that's what he would want to see because he would want to see like an exact like some kind of study looking at the HPA axis and how milky oats like directly affects that in order to be like
Mhm.
classified as an adaptogen. So
Right.
that's my guess. I could be wrong. Sorry, David, if I
Yeah.
misrepresented, but that's what I'm
No, I
thinking.
would love to hear more about that, and maybe that research needs to happen because I'm very curious to see if it would make the list, like if it would meet all the
Uh-huh.
qualifications.
Yeah, me too.
Because in my mind, just in my simple, like what I think an adaptogen is supposed to do, in my mind, is help us to adapt to stress, and
Hmm.
Milky Oats, I find does that really well, whether it's called an adaptogen or not. It does that wonderfully.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, we can see that happening even if we don't have the studies to back it up yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, Yemaya, I just want to take a moment to congratulate myself that I was able to come back and be present with you because once you started saying that you name tincture formulas after songs, and my mind, of course, was just like, what Tori song would we name? And I really like it was a strong like "Arr," like come back, be present. But yeah, now that just popped into my head again. So I'm gonna have to think about
Wow.
that. And if you ever do happen to come up with a Tori song for a formula, because obviously that should be a high priority now. You have to
Yes.
let me know.
Yes, I love Tori Amos. I think we've
Oh,
talked like
lovely.
online a little bit about this. I love Tori, and I'm not the diehard fan that you are, but I've been listening to her since I was in my teens, and I'm already thinking of a few songs that even something simple like "Winter" could just be like
Mm.
some sort of like winter immunity
Autolite
remedy.
sneeze.
Yeah, there you go.
Whoa, that's a
Have so
cool
much
tincture
fun with
formula.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the assignment. How many Tory songs can you turn into a tincture
Of
formula?
course, my favorite line, kiss the violets as they're waking up. But kiss the violets could be a violet based formula.
Yes,
Could be a
yes.
presence. I mean, she's talking about presents. I
Oh
think
my
we should spend
goodness.
the next 20 minutes just brainstorming this. I think everyone's going to want to hear what we come up with.
I really want to think about that more, and like we should just send each other ideas if we come up
Okay,
with
this is
stuff.
good. This is good.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay, great. Well, Yemaya, thanks again for sharing so much about Milky Oats. I'd love to hear how what you have going on in your herbal world and what you'd like to share in terms of your projects and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So my main thing, I don't have any books yet or anything like that. My main thing right now is I just really love working one-on-one with people.
Mhm.
And that's sort of just, that's my happy place. So I do sell some products too on my website. I sell a lot of custom blends to clients and to like, just people who have been repeat customers over the years, markets, like in-person markets, things like that. But my main thing is I just love working one-on-one with someone. I love hearing somebody's very personal, specific story. And I love putting the puzzle pieces together to sort of help them come up with a protocol that is specific to their story and their constitution and their situation. And I work with all different types of people. I would say that I sort of specialize in women over 40 who are stressed out and overwhelmed and have maybe age-related chronic illness, hence the Milky Oats that I use a lot in my practice. But I work with all genders and all ages as well. And if anyone is interested in that kind of offering, you can go to my website, yemayasapothecary.com, and it tells all about the consultations and all about what products are currently available. You can sign up for the email list, which I recommend because I do a monthly newsletter where I just sort of share some herbal tips, seasonal tips, just events, things that I'm up to, that kind of thing.
Wonderful. And you had mentioned that you might have a new client special for listeners.
Yes, if anybody would like to sign up, you can go to the consultation tab, and when you sign up, use the coupon code new client special, I believe is the coupon code, right?
Yep.
And yeah, and you can get $30 off of your intake. And so that's available for anybody who's listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Yemaya. I think seeing a clinical herbalist is so important when we're working for more complex things. And it's kind of an interesting thing because in herbalism, it's so much like herbalism is like the medicine of the people. And so many of us who are interested in herbalism are learning it for ourselves and we want to apply it to ourselves. I just like to say, I see an herbalist. I'm not like, I don't try to be my own herbalist. I'm like the worst
Yeah.
herbalist for myself because I
Mm-hmm.
would, not take enough or like take too many things probably would be the thing, or
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be able to monitor my progress as well, or I'm just too close to myself to
Yeah.
like see, everything. So I highly recommend that people see a clinical herbalist.
Yeah, I know for me, like I need to definitely see another person because I will get freaked out. I will get just, if I start thinking about something that's going on with me, I can't really think about it clearly enough. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really helpful, even if you are an herbalist, to reach out to somebody else. And maybe somebody who's sort of a specialist in whatever you've got going on. And so I think that there can't be enough clinical herbalists or just herbalists in the world. I think the more of us that are out there, the more that people are going to really be able to find what they're looking for, because we all have like our different niches and our different personalities. And so let's all support each other.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, thank you for doing your great work in this world and working with people to hear their stories and help them through their process.
It is an honor and a pleasure. I love it.
Hmm. Well, before we go, I have one last question for you. And that question is, how do herbs instill hope in you?
Yeah. So basically, I've been thinking about that question because I think it's really about right now. It seems like there is a resurgence of people who are interested in herbalism. Do you notice this too?
Hmm.
It
Oh,
seems
yeah.
like it seems like more people than ever are just getting bitten by the herbal bug. And I think that alone instills hope in me.
Hmm.
But I think when that happens, because like different people are coming to herbalism for different reasons. A lot of people are just, seeing that what people are doing, what our society is doing, what our culture is doing in the name of health isn't really necessarily healthy for ourselves and for the planet. So, the plants start calling to them. And we're all doing this with different intentions, with different reasons. But I think that once we do get bitten by the herbal bug, the herbs sort of pull us into greater harmony with nature and, greater alignment with nature. And obviously that happens, on different levels for different people, but we're always better off than when we started. We're always more aligned than when we started. And I think that, this whole observation that there's more herbalists in the world. And by herbalist, I mean, it could be a career, it could be a hobby, you could be a student, you could be a family herbalist, you could be a gardener, you could be a product maker, you could be a teacher or a practitioner. You could have another career that you are infusing your love of herbs into, right? Like maybe you're a teacher a kindergarten teacher who is developed an herbal curriculum and is now teaching it in the schools to the next generation. Or maybe you're a doctor or a nurse and you've learned about herbs and now you're using that as your first go-to before you recommend pharmaceuticals and surgery. All of these people and everyone in between, which is basically probably everybody listening and all of us, right? Our love for herbs is going to impact the world in a positive way, no matter how small. So if you think about your love for plants, and maybe it's just that you've made somebody a cup of tea, or maybe you made somebody a great meal, or maybe you're having a conversation about a plant, or you're walking with them and you show them some. People are going to be affected by that, and it's going to spiral out. This world is actually not that big. And what we think is just like a little drop in the bucket is going to spiral out. And the more people that are jumping on this train, the more healing it has to happen. We can't help it. We don't even have to try. The healing is happening just by what we're doing and our love for the plants. And it's just spiraling outward. And so that is how herbs and herbalism instills hope in me.
Oh, that's beautiful, Yemaya. And I feel like that's just full circle because that reminds me of your friend in Miami greeting the plants, and that inspired you.
Exactly.
Helped you bring along this path, and how I'm sure we can't even quantify or qualify the amount of people that you in turn have touched and helped. So that's beautiful.
And all of us. Yeah, all of us. It's like it does, and sometimes it just circles back around too.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's been such a pleasure to hang out with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
You're so welcome. It is an honor and it is a pleasure. It's funny. I was listening to the Herb Mentor podcast this morning. That was John interviewing you. Yeah. And you were talking about how when you met Tori Amos and you were trying to play it cool. And I kind of feel the same way because I've been following you for a long time. And I'm like, wow, this is really awesome. So it is an honor. It is a pleasure. And you're so much fun to talk to. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure, Yemaya.
Yay.
Thanks for being here. Don't forget to head over to the show notes at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com to download your beautifully illustrated recipe card. There, you'll also be able to sign up for my newsletter, which is the best way to stay in touch with me. You can find more about Yemaya at her website, yemayasapothecary.com. And if you'd like more herbal episodes to head your way, then one of the best ways to support this podcast is by subscribing on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Emily Thomas Anderson is the project manager who oversees the entire podcast operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes and on and on. I often tell people, I just show up. Emily does most of the heavy lifting. Nicole Paul is the operator for the entire Herbs with Rosalee school and community. She keeps an eagle-eye view on everything to ensure it's running smoothly. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusakova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them, and I know you love them. Once the illustration is ready, Jenny creates the recipe cards as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our behind-the-scenes tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. If you've written in with a question, undoubtedly you got help from them. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. Thank you so much for your support through your comments, reviews, and ratings. One of my favorite things about this podcast is hearing from you. I read every comment that comes in, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Okay, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you get a gold star and this herbal tidbit. Well, as a closing gift, Yemaya graciously agreed to share a song with us. This is really a powerful sharing that just feels like medicine in its own right. And it was a beautiful moment. I'm so honored to include it here. Thanks, Yemaya.
Yeah, and so this is a song that I sing in between clients, and I encourage you to sing it too whenever you need healing in your life or whenever you feel like you need to be a vessel of healing for someone else. And it is called Come Healing. And my apologies, I do not know the original author. I learned it from someone who learned it from someone else, but I do believe it is meant to be shared. So, come healing, come into my bones, come healing, make this body your home. Come healing, come into my bones, come healing, make this body your home. Come healing, come into my bones, come healing, make this body your home. Come healing, come into these bones. Come healing, make this body your home.
Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps. I can see why Rosemary got you the gig. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for everything that you're doing in the herbal community and in the community in general. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Yemaya.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Rosalee. If this podcast has brought you inspiration or grounded you in your love of herbs, I'd love to invite you to join the podcast circle. Your membership helps support the show, and it gives you access to live herbal classes, exclusive resources, and a warm community of fellow plant lovers. Learn more and join us at herbalpodcastcircle.com. Your support truly helps this podcast thrive. Thank you.